LA Knight could be set for a major push after WrestleMania 39 this year. We've got details on what that could consist of. The NXT Women's Championship seemingly is vacant, with a ladder match set to crown a new NXT Women's Champion at the Stand and Deliver event during WrestleMania weekend. Speaking of WrestleMania, Mickie James says she'll be in attendance for the event. Grayson Waller invades Johnny Gargano's home last night on NXT. Bron Breakker and Carmelo Hayes signed the contract for their NXT Championship match at Stand and Deliver. Speaking of Stand and Deliver, we now know who the hosts of the event are going to be. A North American Championship match has also been announced for Stand and Deliver. JC Jane reveals she suffered an injury during the NXT Roadblock special. An NXT Women's Tag Team Championship match has also been announced. We've got the ratings for this week's edition of Monday Night Raw. Drew McIntyre nearly missed SmackDown last week due to illness. Austin Theory says it's inevitable that he's going to defeat John Cena at WrestleMania. And The Undertaker explains if the Undertaker character could work if it started in WWE today. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of world wrestling entertainment. Let's start off talking about LA Knight. Yeah, when talking about a push coming after WrestleMania, reportedly because of all of the big reactions, receptions, and praise that the former NXT superstar has been receiving. Now, a new report has provided an update on WWE pushing a SmackDown star after WrestleMania. As previously reported, Dave Meltzer on the latest Wrestling Observer Radio, he discussed the possibility of LA Knight receiving a push within WWE due to his crowd reactions on recent live events. Knight faced WrestleMania 39 main eventer The American Nightmare Cody Rhodes on the March 13 edition of Monday Night Raw. Despite suffering a loss to Rhodes, this seemed to be a hint of something more for the SmackDown superstar. WrestlingNews.co has provided an update noting that people in positions of power in WWE are very happy with LA Knight's work, and they are very happy with the crowd reactions he is getting at live events. Knight is someone who was under the moniker of Max Dupree with the Maximum Male Model stable until Paul Triple H Levesque became the head of creative and brought back his LA Knight character that was popularized in NXT. Of course, he was Eli Drake on the independent scene and in other companies, but certainly LA Knight was born in NXT during the Black and Gold brand era. Now, the belief among those at WrestlingNews.co, the people that they spoke to certainly, is that Levesque wants to do more with Knight after WrestleMania. It hasn't been confirmed if this means the former $1 million champion is in line for a world title program, but his bout with Cody Rhodes on Monday's Raw could perhaps be a sign that the company might look at doing Knight versus Rhodes later on down the line. The report also notes that those within WWE were very happy with how LA Knight handled the creative presented to him during his feud with Bray Wyatt. Of course, it wasn't easy creative, and it's certainly creative that people have struggled with in the past, and LA Knight, you could argue, did the best of what he was given. Some felt the storyline would hurt him, but he ran with everything that was presented to him, and that has not gone unnoticed. Of course, a recent report from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select did indicate that LA Knight was also one of the names presented to Stone Cold Steve Austin for a possible program at WrestleMania. Of course, if we get any more details regarding what the plans for Knight at WrestleMania or after WrestleMania could be, we'll let you know. It was a big episode of NXT last night on the USA Network, and we've got quite a lot of news and information when it comes to Roxanne Perez. Now, WWE has provided a medical update on the NXT star who collapsed after last week's main event match and had to be taken away in an ambulance, with a vignette airing on NXT featuring Dr. Warren Becker, who shared details of NXT Women's Champions Roxanne Perez's clinical picture since last week. The collapse, of course, was just an angle with the idea that Satomura, who was trying to be a mentor, had accidentally ended up overworking Perez before and during the match. Noting that all of Ms. Perez's blood work came back reassuring, initial CT scans showed no abnormalities in the brain. At this time, Roxanne is symptomatically stable. However, accordingly, the medical team has not been able to identify what caused her to collapse, and as a result, there is no estimated time for a return. There would be further workup recommended, including consultation from a clinical psychologist to get to the bottom of what happened to Roxanne Perez. Coming back from the clip, a solemn-looking Vic Joseph and Booker T waited for the first qualifying match to kick off when it comes to the future of the NXT Women's Championship, with Booker T saying that he had spoken to Roxanne Perez's family and this time may be an ultimate low in their lives. Now, Vic Joseph then went on to announce that Stand and Deliver would feature a multi-woman ladder match to determine the NXT Women's Championship in Los Angeles. Now, this was something that was actually announced by Shawn Michaels on social media prior to NXT going on the air last night. He said, quote, "As of Friday morning, Roxanne Perez was discharged from the hospital. However, after numerous tests, Roxanne's health is still in question. With Stand and Deliver in less than 3 weeks, I have an obligation to announce we possibly have to crown a new NXT champion." He then continued saying, "Starting tonight, there will be a series of qualifying matches with the winners advancing to Stand and Deliver to compete to become the NXT Women's Champion in a ladder match." Now, the first qualifiers, as I mentioned, did take place last night on NXT, and certainly we now have 2 people that have been announced for the match. The first qualifier featured Sol Ruka versus Zoe Stark. After a short but hard-hitting match, Zoe Stark would pick up the pinfall victory and advance from this qualifying match. Later on in the show, Gigi Dolan beat Kiana James to earn her way into the ladder match. Now, it's not confirmed how many participants there will be. The graphics suggest 4, but there could be more. We'll have to wait and see, and I wouldn't rule out Roxanne Perez competing in that match. Again, it's still 3 weeks away, so we'll have to wait and see, but certainly big developments when it comes to the NXT Women's Championship. Now, Mickie James, she has confirmed that she's going to be at WrestleMania this year, but it doesn't look like she's going to be wrestling. Impact Knockouts World Champion Mickie James has confirmed she'll be in attendance for WrestleMania 39 Sunday. James is very familiar with some of the competitors on one of the matches that has been announced for the event, with Trish Stratus set to return to the ring to team with Becky Lynch and Lita to face off against Bayley, Io Sky, and Dakota Kai of Damage Control. Speaking with Denise Salcedo, James noted she's excited for the future, pointing out that a number of women have made big comebacks in recent years, saying, quote, "How amazing, how exciting a time of it is in 2023 when we are looking at Lita as a tag team champion with Becky, now looking at Team Bestie going to be at WrestleMania, 2 women I've shared a lot of history with and who I admire, look up to, find hella inspiring, and I just adore." You see that happening there. You see an Impact, I'm the champion in 2023, and our tag team division is shining so bright, and the woman in that locker room. Then you see over at AEW, Saraya comes back from a career-ending injury, someone who they said, oh, she's never going to wrestle again. What a freaking magical time in professional wrestling, and not just in women's professional wrestling, just in professional wrestling across the board. For a long time, it used to be, oh, well, they're retired, they're this, and it would be about this whole new, and it was never about the way about the men as much as it was about the women. She did say that she was going to be at WrestleMania. She said, quote, "I'm going to be there for WrestleCon. I'm going to be out there in LA. I've already texted both of them. I really hope you guys are wrestling on night 2. It's my first time ever watching WrestleMania as a spectator. I've never been. I could never go when we were kids. We didn't have the money. Never went as a child. Have only been as a talent. For my first time ever, in the history of the world, in the history of Mickie James, I'm going to WrestleMania as a spectator. I'm just praying that my friends are wrestling on night 2 so I can watch it there live in person, because I would really love to see it live in person." Again, as of right now, it hasn't been confirmed when the match is going to be taking place, WrestleMania night 1 or 2, so we'll have to wait and see. As we get closer and closer to the event, they release those kind of details. Now, going back to NXT last night, Grayson Waller made it even more personal with Johnny Gargano. Johnny Gargano was thrilled to be back in the midst of his adoptive home of NXT this week, but his joy quickly turned into a nightmare when he realized Grayson Waller had invaded his actual home. Gargano opened the show and mentioned how there's been a lot of talk about finishing your story heading into WrestleMania 39, and that he was back at his old stomping ground to finish his own story, referencing Waller ambushing him with a steel chair in December 2021. During his impassioned promo, Gargano was informed by announcer Vic Joseph that Waller was live streaming on social media from outside his and Candice LeRae's house. Upon hearing the news, Gargano would quickly retreat from the ring and head over to his residence. Subsequently, Waller started streaming videos from inside Gargano's house, going as far as to mock Johnny Wrestling for hoarding action figures. He said, quote, "So this is what main roster money gets you, huh?" Waller asked Gargano. "This place is like a palace. There must be at least 6 bedrooms here, so much room for your action figures. It's a bit of a dangerous neighborhood, Johnny. What if you left the door unlocked? Whoa, I better go check it out, do you a favor." Now, eventually, Gargano showed up to defend his property, and a brawl ensued between the 2 men in the front yard. The cameras also caught LeRae and Quill, aka Baby Wrestling, watching in horror as Waller and Gargano continued to battle. Later in the night, Waller shared a photo of Baby wrestling in tears, a move that got him even more heel heat from the fans on social media. Of course, Gargano and Waller will battle in a grudge match 14 months in the making at the upcoming Stand and Deliver premium live event. So the old house invasion angle taking place last night on NXT. Now, a contract was signed for the NXT Championship match at the upcoming Stand and Deliver event. In a main event segment, contract signing segment on NXT, Bron Breakker and Carmelo Hayes faced off in a verbal battle. While the pair both laid out their rationale for the match, it was Melo who who proved to be, I guess, the person that got the upper hand. Carmelo Hayes urged Bron Breakker to leave all of these recent personas behind because he wants the Bron Breakker who runs through walls. He wants the War Games Bron Breakker, the guy who took on Tommaso Ciampa. Carmelo Hayes delivering a savage set of lines on the NXT champion before Breakker got his chance at a rebuttal. In the end, the mutual respect was apparent, however, the mission was clear. Both men were set on defeating one another for the NXT championship at Stand and Deliver. After the contract was signed, Pretty Deadly, who are in the ring, we'll talk about them in a second, urged Breakker and Hayes to play up the drama for the camera, so naturally the shirts came off and they delivered a stereo move to the tag team through the contract signing table. The show then ended with Bron Breakker holding up the NXT Championship above his head as Melo continued to verbally assault him, of course. Their title match will indeed be taking place at NXT Stand and Deliver during WrestleMania weekend. Now, I mentioned Pretty Deadly. They have also been announced as the host of Stand and Deliver as well. After losing the NXT Tag Team Championship match earlier on in the night against Gallus, in a backstage segment, Pretty Deadly contemplated their next move. Then it came to them. They don't necessarily need Stand and Deliver as much as Stand and Deliver needs Pretty Deadly, and not ones to deprive the NXT universe the opportunity to see them shine. Of course, they will stand in as the hosts for the show. So now the former NXT Tag Team Champions are going to host the big event during WrestleMania weekend. Speaking of Stand and Deliver as well, another title match has been announced. NXT North American Champion Wes Lee will be defending his title against 4 opponents of his choice on April 1st at Stand and Deliver. After his chaotic open challenge during last night's episode of NXT, Lee asked Shawn Michaels if he could face 10 opponents to prove himself, but the Hall of Famer ended up making it a fatal 5-way for the title. Lee will get to pick his 4 opponents, and Michael also told Lee that the open challenges were killing them because of the chaos every week. This week, Chaos had several NXT superstars attacking each other instead of just one wrestler having a one-on-one match with Lee. Lee actually won the then vacant NXT North American title in a 5-way ladder match at NXT Halloween Havoc 2022. He defeated Carmelo Hayes, Nathan Frazer, Oreo Mensah, and Von Wagner to become the new champion. Lee is currently in his first reign as the NXT North American champion, but we're going to get a fatal 5-way match at Stand and Deliver, and possibly Lee could pick the opponent that actually defeats him for the North American Championship. Now, speaking of NXT as well, an injury was suffered last week during the NXT Roadblock special. Whilst last week's NXT Roadblock may have hosted a violent grudge match between Jacy Jayne and Gigi Dolan, now Jayne has revealed that she was not actually at 100%. Noting that she sustained a shoulder separation near the beginning of the match, she was not at full strength when Dolan bested her at Roadblock. In fact, in her time away from NXT, Jacy Jayne planned on spending every available moment not recovering, plotting her comeback and what she would do to Dolan next. A vengeful Jacy Jayne telling the camera she was speaking directly to Gigi Dolan, saying, quote, "When I come back, I promise I'm going to break your heart and your face again." So maybe we don't see Jacy Jayne for a while. Maybe we see her in that ladder match for the NXT Women's Championship. What a perfect time to get another bit of revenge on your former best friend by costing her the NXT Women's Championship. Speaking of the women's division in NXT as well, an NXT Women's Tag Team match has been announced for the upcoming Stand and Deliver event. In a big match on last night's edition of NXT, the number 1 contenders to the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships were determined in a wild match, with 3 teams involved, including former champions Katana Chance and Kaden Carter, Spooky Gals, Isla Dawn and Alba Fire, and Diamond Mine Pals Ivy Now and Tatum Paxley faced off. 3 women were legal at a time in the match. In the end, it was Isla Dawn and Alba Fire who emerged victorious and were announced as the pair getting the title shot at Stand and Deliver. Another talking point was that Paxley actually turned on Ivy Now during the match, breaking them up as a team, something that has been teased with seeds being planted over the last few weeks. So an NXT Women's Championship match is also set for Stand and Deliver too. Now, going back to the main roster here, we've got the ratings for Monday's edition of Raw. Raw, he had a bit of a pothole on the road to WrestleMania this past Monday, with viewership taking a hit in the lull between Elimination Chamber and the final weeks before WrestleMania. WrestleNomics is reporting that this week's edition of Raw from the Amica Mutual Pavilion in Providence, Rhode Island, saw a 7% drop in viewership from last week, with an average of 1.705 million viewers overall tuning in to the March 13 edition. That's the lowest since January 16. The good news is that while overall viewership was down, the key 18 to 49 demographic only saw a 2% bump to 691,000. Of course, this week's show was a packed show. It featured the likes of Edge and Finn Balor's Hell in a Cell match being confirmed, a main event which was a street fight, Kevin Owens versus Solo Sikoa. You had Cody Rhodes facing off against LA Knight. Of course, Brock Lesnar going face to face with a mask for the first time, but unfortunately a bit of a dip, which to be honest I don't think WWE would have expected on the road to WrestleMania when it came to overall viewership. Now, this is a story I feel like I've said a million times, but it's happened once again. There was almost a late major change to creative plans on last week's edition of SmackDown. The show saw a major development in the Intercontinental Championship picture when Drew McIntyre and Sheamus both scored pinfalls in a 5-way match to crown a challenger for Gunther at WrestleMania 39. The double fall set up a singles match between Sheamus and McIntyre for this week's show, but there was almost a late major shift in plans that could have changed everything. Per PW Insider, Drew McIntyre was reportedly extremely ill for all the week prior and wasn't actually cleared to return to the ring until after he arrived at the show and was examined by the company's medical team. There would have been another SmackDown talent substituting for McIntyre in the 5-way, though the report doesn't know which talent it would have been. Drew went on to work all the live events following the show, with him receiving a lot of respect for how hard he's worked for the company when under the weather or worked banged up over the past year. The report says he's very much a locker room leader in that aspect. Now, as I mentioned, that kind of report does touch on it because it's not the first time. We've heard quite a few times over the last 12 months that McIntyre's had food poisoning, or he's had the flu, or he's been ill, or he's been hurt, and he hasn't missed any time. But you would say, please, at some point, recover. You know, he doesn't have to work every single week. Now, Austin Theory, of course, is set to face off against John Cena for the United States Championship at WrestleMania, and he's calling a victory over the 16-time world champion inevitable. On the March 6th edition of Raw, John Cena made his return to the company and was confronted by US champion Austin Theory. Theory challenged Cena to a title match at WrestleMania 39, which he originally turned down, but after a verbal beatdown to the US champion, Cena accepted. On the March 13 episode of Raw, Theory defeated Angelo Dawkins, and on Raw Talk following the show, he declared his eventual win over Cena as an inevitability. Theory said, quote, "How do I feel? I mean, the Street Profits had a bunch of jokes. They did. But at the end of the show, we all see where the jokes are. It's the Street Profits. WrestleMania isn't a joke. No. Because that match is everything. That match is the biggest match. It is the marquee match. It is the top billing. It is Austin Theory versus John Cena. I'm doing what I said I was doing since I was a kid. I said I'd be in the WWE, and I'm here. After WrestleMania, the title was going to be right here. I'm going to be in the middle of my ring on Monday Night Raw, and you want to know why? Because that is inevitable. Any more questions?" And certainly, logically, you would think that maybe, considering Cena's not going to be around, Theory would win, and particularly because it's for the United States Championship as well. Finally, The Undertaker, as I mentioned yesterday, did a fantastic interview with Ariel Helwani of BT Sports. And professional wrestling fans these days, kayfabe is dead. But without it, many beloved characters wouldn't have been as effective or memorable as they were back in the day. At least that's how The Undertaker feels about his dead man persona. While speaking to BT Sport, the Phenom shared how hard it would be for him to introduce The Undertaker into the modern landscape of wrestling, saying, quote, "It would be very difficult just because everyone has a phone that has a camera," he said. I was able to live this character because I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about sitting in the airports in shorts and a Hawaiian t-shirt and somebody being like, "Oh, look, The Undertaker." I didn't have to worry about that. Everybody sees somebody and immediately they want to film them and see what's going to happen. The Phenom feels it would be difficult for an over-the-top character like The Undertaker to be a success in the current climate, but said he would have liked to take on the challenge. The Hall of Famer went on to praise the evolution of athleticism in the business, but emphasized that social media is a hindrance when it comes to wrestlers staying in and developing the character. Quote, "I'm a dinosaur. My mentality is still 20 years ago, but there's a reason why I lasted as long as I did. Just live the gimmick a little bit. You don't need to go to the extremes that I did, but if you're going to post something, at least have it kind of match what you try on television," which, to be honest, I don't necessarily disagree with. But there you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. Remember, you can join the WN365 roster by clicking that join button, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.